Hello everyone and welcome to another Stargate lore video. Today we're going to be talking about the Eurondans.
Their whole world is in flames and we're offering gasoline. How is that help?
We are in fact offering water.
Thank you.
I was speaking metaphorically.
Well, stop it. It's not fair to Teal.
History. The Eurondans were descendants of humans who had been brought to their world by the Goa'uld, and later the Goa'uld either left or were driven off. Regardless, the people of Euronda were free to develop their own civilizations, to which the nation-state of Euronda would develop a eugenics-based society which put a high amount of emphasis on genetic purity and purging those who would not conform.
What?
This brought them into conflict with the other inhabitants of Euronda, which is confusing since both the planet is called Euronda and the nation-state the Eurondans live in is also called Euronda. Sorry, getting back on point. This brought them into conflict with their enemy, the Breeders, who bred indiscriminately regardless of genetic purity. So, you know, like normal people. Now, whether or not the Breeders were a single nation-state or a coalition of nations isn't really known. Most assumptions I've seen state that they were one nation, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a group of nations that the Eurondans just didn't draw any distinctions over. Regardless, tensions had been building between the two for some time, and the Eurondans eventually planned to wipe out the Breeders. Their plan was to build a massive underground bunker which had the capability of poisoning the atmosphere and killing all life on the surface. The plan seemingly would have involved them staying in the bunker until the atmosphere had recovered, and then go onto the surface and be free of all those filthy Breeders. Unfortunately for them, and fortunately for the Breeders found out about this and tried to stop them. While they couldn't stop the poisoning of the atmosphere, we do know that the Breeders did somehow survive, most likely taking shelter underground as well. This started a several decade-long war, with drones and pilots being sent to the surface to fight each other. Due to a lack of resources, many Eurondans had to go into stasis to preserve resources. It's not really clear when the Eurondans found the Stargate. We were told it was discovered while they were creating the tunnels for their defense system, which would imply it was found when the bunker was being built, but raises the question why they didn't use it earlier. I mean, it's not an unheard of thing in Stargate. For example, the Una slave planet had the gate seemingly their entire history, and they only learned how to go to one other planet very recently. And Earth itself is even an example of this, as they found the gate near the end of World War II, and it took them almost 50 years to learn how to use it. But Earth didn't have a DHD, and the Eurondans do, and the Eurondans are also 100 years more advanced than us. I don't know, it just seems kind of strange. Regardless, after nearly several decades of fighting, the Eurondans were nearing defeat. Around this time they found out how to use the Stargate to contact Earth and tried to call for help. They sent 3 people through to make contact, but Earth didn't know they were dialing and kept their iris closed, and
So, 3 dead.
Yes, sir. When contact was established, Stargate Command sent SG-1 to make what they could of the situation, and even help the Eurondans repel a few enemy attacks. During the talks, the Eurondans only asked for deuterium oxide, or heavy water, to fuel their shields and weapons so they could better defend themselves and go on the offensive, and in exchange they would give Earth all of their technologies. Due to the rising threat of Apophyse's return at this time, many in Stargate Command wanted to take advantage of the deal. Everyone except for Daniel, who felt it wasn't right to take advantage of the Eurondans in this situation and kept looking at other options, such as having the Eurondans leave the planet. Eventually Jack told Daniel to
Shut up.
but changed his tune when Alar told him that maybe Teal'c shouldn't come by anymore because he wasn't like them. Jack told Daniel to start asking lots of questions while he and Teal'c did their own investigation. Jack and Teal'c had gone off to the stasis chambers and realized all the Eurondans in the chambers looked very similar to one another. Daniel had asked more information about the Breeders, like their name, because at this point they only knew them as the enemy, to which a Eurdoan had explained that they were sometimes called Breeders because they bred indiscriminately with no regard for genetic purity. Daniel would then later use this to come to the conclusion that they had started the war. Carter came to a similar conclusion after she had gone off on her own and looked at the schematics for the bunker, seeing these tubes that ran all the way to the surface, which were used to pump the poison into the atmosphere. Alar, during the final attack, had all but confirmed this and demanded that SG-1 get them more heavy water, to which Daniel said no, and Alar threatened him and Carter to get more heavy water. Jack, who was at this time piloting one of the drones, then turned on the Eurondans and helped the breeders break through the defenses. SG-1 then defeated the Eurondans who were holding them hostage and made their escape as the bunker was coming down. However, Alar had followed them and begged for them to take him with him so he wouldn't die, and the Eurondans would leave this universe on this sad, sad note.
Close the iris.
Do it.
Biology. Now, normally I wouldn't cover a section like this, given that the Eurondans are just humans, and I assume you all know how the human works. But since they put a lot of focus on it, I might as well talk about it. Given how Alar reacted to Teal'c, and as well as just kind of looking at them, you can assume that their ideal human being would have been white. And as such, we can assume they all are white. I've read reference to them being based on Nazi ideology, specifically eugenics and the pure race thing, and I can see that. It's not really stated if they have that whole blonde hair, blue eye thing, although a number of them do have blonde hair and blue eyes. Besides the whole trying to keep genetically pure, I don't know if there's actually any biological differences between the two. For example, with the Shen, we knew that they had become more sensitive to sound over time, which was a biological difference between them and the humans from Earth. As far as I can tell, there are none for the Eurondans, so they're just nutcases, really. Society. While we know Eurondan society was heavily influenced by eugenics and genetic purity, we don't really know much beyond that. For example, we don't really know how their government operated. We know Alar's father was among the leadership when the war started, and Alar himself seems to be in a leadership position. But Alar states he really only got that position because of the respect of his father, and that in practice a lot of responsibilities have to be shared because of how few of them there are left. Which is kind of weird. One might assume Alar got his position because he was bred for that purpose. Like Alar's family was bred for the leadership caste, while someone like Olin's family would have been bred for fighting. Though it is possible they did have a meritocracy, and just as a side note, they seem to treat women equally, so... point? Maybe? It's just kind of hard to draw conclusions on a society that's in its final hours. Although, based off the decorations in their meeting rooms, and the fact they keep alcohol is kind of bottled for special events like we do with wine, we can probably assume they had some form of higher culture. Technology. Technologically, the Eurondans were at least 100 years more advanced than Earth was in the year 2000, having mastered fusion at this point through the use of deuterium oxide or heavy water. They had technologies such as stasis technology, shielding technology, advanced medicine that can heal the body almost immediately, and they had a device called a remote flyer, which allows a pilot to pilot a drone called an aerofighter, which is energy weapons, through the use of their mind, and can even pilot more than one fighter at once. However, constant use of this specific technology can lead to mental degradation. Relations with other races. The only races the Eurondans had contact with before their extinction were the Breeders and the Tari, both of whom they had poor relations. The Breeders because they tried to exterminate them, and while they have a very short positive relationship with Earth, that eventually fell apart when it was revealed what the Eurondans had done. And I doubt any Eurondan-Earth alliance would have lasted very long, even Earth agreed to continue to supply them with heavy water. If in an alternate timeline they had won the war or managed to travel to other worlds, I doubt they would have been very friendly with the rest of the humans and aliens throughout the galaxy who didn't share their beliefs. And kind of goes without saying, but they'd probably be enemies of the Goa'uld because everyone's enemies with the Goa'uld. And that was the Eurondans, and I like them. Not that I like Nazis or eugenics or anything, that's not what I mean. I kind of like two things about them. One, they're a good one-off enemy, I think, for SG-1 to fight. And two, I like the lesson they sort of tell. That being, you can't implicitly trust somebody just because they're offering you all these good technologies. Although, ironically enough, later in the season, Stargate Command would encounter the Ashen for the first time in the episode 2010, and in that alternate timeline, nearly led to the destruction of Earth. So I guess the lesson didn't quite stick. But yeah, that was the Eurondans. What do you all think? Do you like them as a sort of one-off enemy, or would you like to see them been a more reoccurring villain in Stargate? And what do you think about the lesson? Do you think SG-1 really ever learned it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe like and subscribe. And remember,
perhaps it would be best if the Jafar did not return.
Teal? Why? He hasn't said a word.
It's not what he said.
It's what he is.
Well, he's different. I'll grant you that.
Not like us. Right.
What? You fuckers. You fuckers. You motherfucker. I will rain hellfire upon you.